I also think there's a mistake that young men put too much pressure on themselves that every kick someone's watching that's going to change their fate should they want to go to the NFL or not.
Welcome to the Talent Alone Won't Win podcast. I am your host, Suzi Freeman. I am a mental performance coach, specifically working with kickers, punters, and long snappers. And I welcome you to the channel. Hey, everybody. Today I'm super excited. We have Aaron Perez here with the Punt Factory, and he's going to give us all the goods on what he helps guys with and, personal experiences through draft prep. Welcome, Aaron. Thanks for being here and taking your time.
Susie, no problem. It's a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, I love that. So, just, I know a lot of people in the specialist world know who you are, but fill us in a little on your journey, how you got into coaching, and just that kind of process there.
Well, I'm starting to feel like a dinosaur now. I turned 40 this year. And so a lot of the younger kickers and punters, I'm finding it's interesting because like, as you said, I feel like a lot of people for a long time kind of knew, about what we did. But to make a long story short, I played a long time ago at UCLA. I worked with Chris Saylor kicking from 2001 through college. At that time, there really wasn't a lot of any other camps on the West Coast. Chris kind of took me under his wing. I owe a lot to him. And much different world back then. As a junior, I had something like 25 to 30 offers on scholarship, which
Oh, nice.
they don't do that anymore. So it was just a different time. But I was really happy. I went to UCLA mostly because my parents were close and I wanted them to be able to come to the games. Um, After college, I spent a little bit of time with the New England Patriots. I was there for about a month in the off season. Did some other various camps. But right around that time, 2009, 2010, I started coaching punters more full time. Anytime that I was home or anytime that I was out and about, I would, schedule workouts with punters, and really just grew the punt factory, from that time. So it's been about 15, 16 years now. I've worked with a bunch of guys over that time. I travel quite a bit to do it. So it's obviously my life's work and kind of what I feel like my calling was to do as opposed to, maybe being a professional player, just coaching and mentoring. And it's been great so far.
Yeah, and you said travel a lot. So one thing I learned from you, gosh, probably a year and a half ago, however it was we first met, you go to Japan a lot and Korea. So it's interesting to hear that. So I think with that, maybe some people, maybe some people know, maybe some don't. Question: are there any opportunities for Americans over there?
So yeah, so the traveling was interesting because it started really small. When I was living in SoCal, I would just go, oh, hey, there's guys coming down to train from Fresno. I'll go to Fresno. Someone you may know, Josh Carlson out in Phoenix, 2017, 18. I was like, hey, dude, I'd love to come to Phoenix for the weekend and work with some guys. Like, hey, man, you can stay in my pool house. So we stayed in Josh's pool house and worked with guys at Gilbert High School. So it
Nice.
started off like that. Then it, gradually expanded into like Seattle and then Texas and just kind of like, hey, if there's 10 guys that want to train, I'll buy a ticket. And the benefits of being, young and single and having time to do that. Korea and Japan came about more recently, having worked with the Korean athlete, Jin Kang, who's now at Idaho State, connected me with some coaches there in Korea, flew out, did a couple camps in 2024. 2025. Japan started in 2024. I coached one of their professional punters here in Nashville. We hit it off, and he kind of helped set up our first camp. The American stuff is interesting because Korea really doesn't have an infrastructure to play football. They're really big on flag football, athletically, and I love all the athletes there. But they're much more suited to golf and badminton so far. There's more suited to soccer and um, there's not a lot of overly big 300-pound people in Korea.
Oh,
Whereas
got
in
it.
Japan, yeah, so in Japan, they play in high school, college, and in their professional league. It's called the X League. And just for anyone that doesn't know, most of the teams, I believe it's something like 8 or 9 out of the 12 teams, are actually sponsored and owned by a company. So, for instance, the punter who came played for the IBM Big Blue Dragons. So he was working for IBM in Japan. Um, each of the teams does have an allocated amount of spots for non-workers, meaning you can just be a really good, like they have some of the teams like a running back that may have played collegiately here or a wide receiver,
Okay.
but most of the time they won't give that spot to a kicker or punter because those spots are so coveted.
Mm,
If that makes sense, right?
yeah.
They can't. But so there is opportunity there. I had a couple teammates of mine that played there. One even he became the head coach at IBM, but it's not as common per se as maybe Europe or anything like that in Japan.
That's really interesting, kind of cool though. So it's like, "Hey, I have a job at IBM. Oh, you have a football team? Let's go."
Well, and it's like it's funny because, like you said, there's Sony, there's Fujitsu, there's Panasonic, and
Yeah.
so I don't know how one would go about. Like, I don't know if it's like, hey, I can play football. Will you hire me in your Japan office? But
You're
I
getting a
know.
job because you're good at football.
Well, there's so many laws and regulations there too, right? Like to get a job in Japan as a foreigner, a lot of times you have to speak the language. A lot of
Mm,
times you have to. So I think there are opportunities, but it's just cool to me that they play organized. Their college teams are really good. Their high school teams are pretty good. So um, I don't know. It's just an interesting one on that end.
yeah, no, it is very interesting. I love it. It's super fun. So to know that. One thing I'd ask you, since we really are in the midst, well, I would say now, at least the guys I work with that are draft ready, draft eligible. Now everyone's in a waiting game. Pro days are done,
Mhm.
combines, all the things are done for the guys I'm with. Um, so this waiting game is a little bit hard, right?
Yes,
But
ma'am.
how do you prep guys, and how have you prepped them when they're ready? Say, it's that senior year and they're like, "Yes, I'm gonna declare." How do you start prepping them? Is it any different? Do you up level anything? What's that like?
Yeah, and so that's a really good question. So for punters and kickers, right, it's a whole different process in terms of when you take like a really good wide receiver or a defensive lineman, someone that is going to potentially earn a large amount of money, right, with your early round guys. Typically, from my experiences, right, and working with agents that I've worked with, and I know like they're willing to invest a lot more money in them because the return on investment, right, they're going to be drafted, they're going to make a lot more money. For kickers and punters, right, it's typically been, in my experience, a bit different. So a lot of times going into their senior year, you'll have your group of punters that you've worked with, let's say for the last, some of them since high school. So I'll take like Dan Whelan as an example, right? Um, Dan had a very good career at UC Davis. A couple teams had reached out to me, a special teams coordinator that I knew in the NFL during that COVID year, where
Mhm.
it was like, is Dan going to leave or is he going to play one more year? Because if that spring, the FCS teams in California played in the spring. So it was going to be a very quick turnaround. Dan ultimately decided to stay, played his senior year. Um, what I started doing around that time was going to a certain location. So in that year, it was Northern California. And there was him, Ryan Wright, and a young man named Seth Vernon, all of whom wanted to pursue the dream.
Okay.
And so I went out there for like 2 weeks. We trained, we lifted, we did, like mock combines, things that they would experience at a Gary Zahner at that time, or any of those kind of pre-draft things. Um, None of them were invited to the NFL draft, which is ironic because both Ryan and Dan are obviously still playing. But we just kind of put them through like what you're going to experience at, let's say, Gary's combine, right? It's very short, very sharp, 2 to 3 balls middle, 2 to 3 right, 2 left, whatever it may be. I know it's changed. Um,
Seems similar.
yeah, and it's. I know that Gary refines it, and I know these guys refine it based on what a scout wants what they want to see when they're there. But all of that to be said, right? I will just prepare a guy based on their pro day workouts, their private workouts, the combines they're going to go to, and just try to get into their mind that they need to perform, they need to execute in a short amount of
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
Beyond that, right? Like I always will tell people like it is, we're not doing the work for them on the field. We can prepare them, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, however you approach your role,
Mhm.
me from a mental perspective of the punting, but ultimately they need to be able to go out and perform. So
Right.
you're just, waiting for that phone call after, how'd you do? How'd you do? How did it go? Um, and since that time, I've done them in Orlando, I've done them in Houston. And my job is just, like I said, to help them prepare from like a this is what's going to be expected of you from a punting perspective. Let's go through this test so many times that when it happens, it's just another chapter in that story.
Right. Yeah. I did have one of my guys who just wrapped up his pro day, and he was not expecting that it would be like 6 kicks right in a row. Boom, boom, boom. Like he's like, I just barely was like getting, it's like go do again kind of thing. So interesting stuff to always learn that, right? Because now I have that knowledge to remind and teach future guys, be ready, practice like that. Because I know watching Zoners, I go to his stuff because he's not far from me. So I love to go and watch. They get a bit of time, as you know. If there's 12 of them there, number one goes, they go through all the numbers, then you come back around. So you've got, 11 people to watch and wait before it's your turn again. That could either be grueling or great.
No,
So,
you're right, and that's like I remember, and part of the fun stuff, right, is that I did it too. So when I came out in 2009, it would have been that spring. I didn't go to the draft. I went and did Gary's free agent showcase.
okay.
I don't remember if he had a senior one at that time, but I had to go out the day before and qualify. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like, you're feeling that nerve. And he had kind of said, I think that you can qualify. So I punted a few balls, did well. He said he gave me the nod.
Come to Phoenix. Let's see if you're good enough.
Oh, and I listen. The thing is
Spend the money.
he's so intelligent because at the end of the day, he knows people will do it because that, as far as I know, that is still the only combine he runs where all of the scouts are there in person, right? If you're not in Indianapolis, so he knows that there is a supply and demand, perspective from
Mhm.
that. But when we went out, I remember sitting there that morning in that room, pre-camp, and you're sitting by guys that I had just watched on TV a couple weeks ago that had gotten cut or that had just played in the NFL previously. And I was like, dude, I was watching you. One name, Derek Frost, was there. This is a long time ago, but he was someone that I admired. He was punting, I think, for the Redskins at that time. And it was like, oh my gosh, you're at the same camp as me now. I'm no longer a fan. We're competitors. Um, and I wanted so bad to watch them punt, but I had told myself I was going to turn around and just not. I don't want to watch anyone else do good. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of that is where something like what you do and what I mean, they have to come together because
Yeah.
some guys do better when they don't look. Some guys are like, I don't care. It makes me do better. And so
Yeah.
it's just each athlete individually teaching them, helping them find their best route, I guess, of
Mhm.
how they're going to handle those circumstances.
No, that's so true. Yeah. Just, getting to know them and what works for them. And I tell the guys that sometimes too when they're like, I just, I get nervous or I overthink a little or I this or that. And when it comes to a point where we don't change that much, they perform exceptionally well. It's like lean into it. It's
Yeah.
obviously not hurting you. Let's lean into that. So yeah, I'm with you on that. What works for you doesn't work for the next guy. So I like that piece. What would you say when it comes to the guys wanting to be ready? I pick an age, it's totally fine in that college space. Thinking about, they're like, hey, I'm thinking about going, yeah, I'm pretty good or good enough. I feel like I could go pro. What is the biggest mistake that you see a little bit of the younger guys make early that, man, if you just that you would be so much better off?
I would say so. I'm a very big believer in all of them, all of the guys that I work with, right? Like, as you and I know, right? As you get older, opportunities change, but in this space, they go away. Like, once you hit
Mhm.
27, 28, 29, you're not going to be invited to camps anymore, whatever that may be. So, I think the biggest mistake, and I don't know how I would qualify it's not necessarily a mistake, but it's more of like just because you're playing in college doesn't mean that you're going to be automatically, given an opportunity at the highest level, right? So there's now, with how much money is involved, there is, and how many spots are out there and how many good players there are, whether it be internationals or transfer, like, just because you were the best player in your own conference or whatever that may be doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that opportunity. There still has to be something special about your performance, your physical capabilities. um, there are guys that finish every year that play at a Power Four school that you still, oh, that guy was there, oh, he was pretty good. um, that may not get an opportunity. There's also players at those schools that you may not have heard about that scouts have had their eye on because they are performing, but maybe they're a little bit more under the radar. I think the biggest mistake or the biggest misconception to answer that question is just because you're doing well, you're not guaranteed a shot. But I would still say that you should pursue it because once you don't pursue it anymore, you don't get that opportunity. So you might as well go out and compare yourself and test yourself at the highest level. If it doesn't work out when you get to be, older, you're not going to regret, not, I mean, like, like you give it all
Well,
you got. Yeah. Like you
yeah.
just don't want to say like, I didn't go for it because I didn't think I was good enough. You might as well go out and no one watches, but you did it. But
Yeah.
I do think that there's this idea that like, oh man, I made my field goals or I was a decent punter and I played at these schools and I'm going to go to I'm going to try. And I guess now that I'm saying, I don't know that it's a mistake, but I do think that there's a misconception about that. One more thing that I'll add, Susie, is that I'm thinking about it is I also think there's a mistake that young men put too much pressure on themselves that every kick someone's watching that's going to change their fate should they want to go to the NFL or not.
Yeah.
So from a punting perspective, and I experienced it, and I know a lot of guys do, they'll go out, they'll have 3 or 4 punts in a game. The third one isn't very good. And then they go, oh crap, now like someone saw that third punt and now I'm not going to go to the NFL, even though I'm a redshirt freshman at Arizona.
I know. It's
You
so
know? And it's like when you start to put that pressure on yourself, again, easy for us to say, just enjoy
Mhm.
the moment.
Right.
Then that's the mistake I think that can happen is you start analyzing and taking sample sizes of
Yeah.
one kick you missed, one punt you missed. And realistically, no one's going to go back and look at that 4 years down the road, 3 years down the road about that punt you shanked at Miami of Ohio. That's why we didn't draft you. Like nobody, no one's going to remember that.
Well, I agree with you. That is such a huge thing, and it's funny that you say redshirt freshman because I have a couple guys that are left high school early to get into spring ball, and they're, like, comparing themselves to the senior starter. I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
You're a baby in this game. Don't forget,
Absolutely.
you were the top there, you're bottom here. Like, let's keep it in perspective." Not in a negative way, but right? It's that keeping the, you know, I don't know, non-comparison alive, if you will. I want to touch on the fact that just reminding guys that even though, because you kind of said, even though you come out of those big power fours or whatever it might be, a D1, a this, that, and you're top, like top in that space, I mean, they don't make it sometimes for 1 to 2 years out of college
Hmm.
before they even get a decent NFL opportunity, and I really just wanna remind guys of that, with that, keep trying like you said. So, with that thought process, what's a good amount of time? I have guys, some free agents now and even guys in this draft piece that are like, "Hey, I'm gonna give it 2 to 3 years. If there's no real opportunity, then I'll pursue different career."
Hmm.
What's your thought in that?
So that's such a good question. So I know when I came out, I had two things in my mind. Number one, once I lost the spark to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and go power clean and squat and run stadiums, that was my first of like, if I'm not motivated to lift and do that anymore, because it takes a toll on your body, right? You
Oh,
have just done it then that's the first thing.
okay.
Number two, it was always, and this is going to sound bad, but at the time I was, 22 and full of bravado. If I went to a free agent camp and some kid from a school that I've never heard of just completely destroyed me, then it's time to hang it up, right? It's like if I'm not consistently one of the best players at one of these things, then there's no point. At least it was in my eyes.
Okay.
The interesting thing now is even with the eight, I think it's what 10 teams in the UFL or 18. Like there are now more opportunity to
Mhm.
play. So you
Yeah.
look at a guy like Colby Wadman was my first NFL player. He played 2 years with the Broncos, got released, did some workouts, but then he started up with the Birmingham Stallions, and he's been there since the league's inception.
Okay.
But he's also getting to the point of like, hey, I'm 27 years old and I'm playing in the UFL, and if I'm not getting that, he might be 28, 29, but like if I'm not getting that NFL opportunity, what's the point of continuing to do this, right? So
Hmm.
I tell the average guy, like, I would say, dude, you got to give it at least a year. And what
Okay.
I mean by a year is you do your pro day, you do your workouts, give it that spring. If you don't go to OTAs, then the next year you have a guy like Zonner that does a free agent camp. And I think you should at least go for it there if you still love it and want to pursue it. If you don't make that camp or you go there and you're just not one of the best guys, typically, then it's up to you, right? Because it's very hard to get back in the good graces because there's always so many good players coming to these things. Guys that are dropping out of the NFL, guys that are dropping out of the UFL. As I said, I think I just saw like Seth just got signed by Miami. I mean, that guy is such a great story of like Portland State, went to the Falcons early, has been in camps with certain teams, but Seth is also hitting a ball that there's only a certain amount of people in the world that can hit when he's on. So I can see why he has pursued it for so long because it's like wherever I go, I'm consistently one of the better players and he
Yeah.
deserves everything coming his way. But I always say give it at least a year. If you wanted to do it again, great. But now you're talking, you have to start providing for yourself.
Mhm.
You have to start working and it becomes a balance of
Right.
where do I live? How do I train? When I'm working a job that, like you got to kick before 9 or kick after 5. And that gets really hard really quick.
Yeah, that I would say is one of the bigger struggles with the free agents I work with now. But fortunately, and maybe not all, fortunately, now they're being paid. So if the guys are smart and have the opportunity to maybe, after college live at home and they saved whatever NIL dollars they may have gotten, it could buy them an extra year, honestly.
Absolutely.
But I do know, for those that don't know, and you absolutely correct me, I do know, one of my guys that came down, long snapper, he was here for the Coles and Zonners senior showcases, and they were a week apart. So he came a few days early to get some workouts and then was here for that whole week. But paying for 2 camps and paying for an Airbnb in Phoenix for that, 10-ish days and his flights and a rental, he was like 5, 6K deep. Like,
Yeah.
he was like, "Whoo," and I know that weighs on the guys because they're like that puts that extra weight on them to make it mean something more. So, what's your thought on knowing that you came into the game when there really was no NIL for these guys, and now there is? And I know the specialists get paid a lot less money than most, and as far as my snappers, they say they're even paid less than anybody, but do you see a difference in, like, the last few years for previous where guys might have a better opportunity if they were smart with any dollars they did receive?
Um, yeah, I do. I mean, so you look at across the board, as you said, right? I mean, in order to get paid, you're probably a starter. And if you're a starter getting paid, you're probably at a bigger school, right? You're probably at a school that can afford that. So a lot of those guys fall into that category of, hey, I started at X school, right? I
Mhm.
started at this school, and I did well. And so I do want to give this a shot. I still seem to find that a lot of the kids, their parents are still helping subsidize things, which I say that with a smile, not because of any other reason other than being a parent. It's like, I respect that because you've come so far with your kid. You've come with them through peewees and high school and all this. I do think more kids have the money now to say, I'm going to go spend a week training here, or I'm going to come to Nashville and stay. Um, we actually had 2 young men last year who got no NIL, but came and stayed with us and trained full time in our house, and paid for the sessions and stuff. And it worked out really good. They got a couple NFL workouts, but
Okay.
where the training is concentrated now, which is that Southwest, San Diego,
Mhm.
Phoenix, New York, LA, those are not cheap places to stay. And so to answer
Not
your
this
question,
time
I
of year.
think no, but I would always say to a young man, you have the rest of your life to make money, no matter how much money you have now or how much it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
Do this while you can, because the minute you stop and you're making good money, you'll always think back to, hey, I went for it and I got to see some cool things and train with cool people. And even if it leads to just a workout or no workouts, you were still this close and talking to people on TV, right? NFL teams, UFL teams. And I do think more kids are doing it, but I also think that I would, like, to your point, I would always say, dude, just do it, because when you stop, it's done. And
Right. You're missing an opportunity that's rare, right?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
It's
And
so
also,
funny.
I was saying also just like when you're like I said, you never, like I said, I keep harping on this, but like you can never really come back and do it. You can't just take 3 years. I mean, you could, but the chances of that working out are not gonna, transpire most likely.
Yeah. I had just chatted with one free agent. He's like, I don't know." And I'm like, "Listen, there's only like 3 opportunities, 4 opportunities in a year that these guys do these combines. If you're missing them, like, that's just you may as well give it up."
Yeah,
And I always tell the story of last year at March when it was Zonner's free agent camp, and I was chatting with Austin, who lives here in Phoenix with me. So we're 30 minutes from Zonner's camp. The camp was like 6 or $700. And I remember chatting with Austin, and he's kind of like, "Man, I don't know if I'll go. It's kind of expensive." And I'm like, "You gotta go. Like, it's only up the street. Just go. Like, do it." And that's when the Jets were there and
yeah.
gave him a workout. And so I'm like, so I tell everybody, I'm like, "You gotta go because you never know when that opportunity is sitting there." But I get that it's pricey. But yeah, I mean, that is true. Like here in Phoenix, these guys, they do it in right at that they do it right over like the waste management time. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Why would you do that?" The Airbnb is probably the most it's ever gonna be in Phoenix, same with hotels. But yeah, these poor guys, it was like, "Oh, I feel bad." I'm like, "One of these days, I'll just open up my house for them once my girls are gone." Like, "You can live here."
Yeah, and you know what? But like that's what I mean, it's so weird because on the business side now, you kind of look at it and you go like, if there's demand for your service and what you provide, I mean, but to that point, around the waste management, it would be like holding a camp in Monaco on the F1 weekend. It's like, but these guys, like I said, I think all of them kind of understand and budget, for that first round, whether it be a senior combine or
Mhm.
a senior showcase, or I know that Jamie does like a joint free agent senior one. It's like, if
Yes.
I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. But as you said, the hard part is if you don't, there really is nothing from March until the next year
Mhm.
because of OTAs and the seasons are starting.
Right.
And so it's kind of like this pressure field. Like, do I spend the change? And if I spend the money, I need to go prepare for it. But then that's going to cost me money to go train. But like I said, that's where I think we align. It's like, just do it because the worst that's going to happen, that you look yourself in the mirror and you did it. And that's
Agreed.
sometimes
Yeah.
better on the soul than anything.
Yeah, right, right. Regret's harder than
Absolutely.
failure. So,
Absolutely.
I love that. What do you feel like I mean, we actually really touched a lot on that. So, what would you say is the best piece of advice you can give guys at I'm gonna ask you for 2 of them. At
Sure.
the, junior, senior in college, like, they're good, they're worthy, like, let's step it up. What's that piece of advice? And then answer for those, like, free agents going into, say, 2nd year, that where you
Sure.
said you're really gonna need to make choices. What advice do you have for? Because 'cause I'm sure it's different.
Yeah, I think for juniors and seniors, there's the biggest piece of number one is like make sure you step back and enjoy the moment you're in because that is the last realistically, right? And bar like injuries or getting cut or not starting. That's the last time you're guaranteed football if you're on a roster,
Yep,
right? And even now, pat yourself on the back, like embrace the fact that you are on a roster, considering now that they cut the rosters down at the highest level and you're still playing, getting your education, getting to play football.
yeah,
I would also say, as we kind of touched on earlier, don't start evaluating every punt in your mind or every kick in your mind or every snap in your mind because it's very easy to do that if you're thinking I want to go to the NFL. Maybe you're on like a preseason award watch list, or maybe your coach is telling you like, "Hey, dude, like," because you and I both know, right? There's like the people that make the decisions on whether you're going to get a chance to even play in college or in the NFL aren't the ones saying like, "Hey, dude, this guy's got an NFL leg." Those are typically your own coaches. And so you have to be able to filter out noise, but also if you have a bad snap, it's okay. The Giants are not going to not call you because you had one bad snap in a game, right? That what they're going to do is look at the course of your season. They're going to look at the course of a couple games where maybe you didn't have your best games and how you rebounded. So the second piece of advice is just play, just have fun, just enjoy the moment, showcase your abilities, and the other stuff's going to take care of itself. Because once you start saying, I had one bad punt here, I had one bad kick here, and now that's affecting your next 3 or 4 kicks,
Yeah.
You're getting farther away from your dream, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think for the second and third year guys, it's the best piece of advice I could give is like I said, and I just be as realistic with yourself as possible. If you're going to these camps and you're spending the money and you find that you're consistently one of the lower 5 to 10 players, there's nothing to say that maybe you can't improve. But at that point, with how ruthless and how much of a business this is,
Mhm.
you're not going to get the same amount. Once Colby played 2 years for the Broncos, and it ended okay. He had a couple games he struggled, and he's never really got back in. I think he played one more preseason game for the Commanders a couple years ago. But basically, a lot of times, like once you're out with that level, once they don't deem, look at Marquette. Like once you're out, it's very hard to get back in. And I don't know his specific situation per se, but I guess my advice is be realistic with yourself, set yourself realistic expectations, and also understand if you're consistently one of the lowest performers, then you also need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, at this point, am I just spending money or am I chasing something that's realistic?
Right.
Because it is fun to just keep training and all of that. You know what I mean? And like I said, go for it when you can, but also be realistic with like, what are my opportunities looking like here? Because it's a very ruthless kind of no forgiving, unforgiving business, I guess, per se.
Are you honest with your guys like that? So
Oh, yeah.
let's just say there's a 32-year-old free agent released from one of the leagues. Are you and he comes to you and he's like, "I can do it." Are you like, I mean, like,
I mean,
what
I guess it depends. It depends when he got released. Like if he was just released from a team,
yeah,
then yeah. I mean, now there's a good opportunity if you, especially if your agent still is working that angle of like he just got released, he's ready to go. That's
right,
when you never know that a team who's maybe thinking about getting into the playoffs and their punter starts to struggle a little bit, maybe they call that guy if he has that experience.
okay.
Um, but if he's 32 and hasn't been signed since he was 25, and he's
Well,
just yeah, then maybe it's like, hey man, maybe,
you're
but
like,
you have
"I
to be
don't
honest.
want your money. How
Yeah,
about you wanna come coach with me?"
yeah, dude. Or also like you could pay me in dinner and let's go talk about how ridiculous this is looking because I think that's the hard part, right? And that's the balance as a private coach is like, I'd love to make your X amount of dollars, but
Mhm.
realistically, what it is, it's the same with a high school kid. If you're training with me because you want to go D1 and you're a 5'3" punter that, can't hit a 40-yard punt, then my role in your life is to be honest and say, unless we rearrange or manage expectations,
Mhm.
because eventually I'm on the hook for that, right? We're on the hook.
Yeah.
Hey, Susie, you told me I'll be in the NFL if I get my mind right. Well, that's a bad reputation to have if we're
Yeah.
not on, if we're not honest.
So far, I haven't said that.
Well, I was
What
trying to
I
make it more
say
like,
is, if you do the work, most things are possible.
oh, no, and I was trying to make a lighthearted, just like
Yeah.
the young men when you're going, like that's how we have to always be careful what we say because they'll hang
Mhm.
on to anything.
Yes.
And I'm sure we did the same things, but ultimately all of this to be said, I think the advice for those is different, right? Enjoy the moment. Don't take small sample sizes at the college game.
Yeah.
If you have a bad game or two, but the next 3 games you come out and average 50, no one's going to remember those two. A good team may come back and say, what did you change in your mind? We looked at these 2 games. You struggled poorly in bad weather. How did you get over that in the next game?
Yeah.
And then those older guys, like I said, it's kind of like go for it, but just be realistic with your opportunities so you're not missing other opportunities in your life.
Yeah, and that tidbit right there just reminded me of something. One of my guys that is in the draft process right now, one thing he told me Sunday when we chatted is that NFL teams, they aren't necessarily coming in right at the moment for workouts, but he'll get on Zooms and watch film with them and they ask those questions. They'll
Yeah.
bring up plays and ask, well, what happened here? What were you thinking? And he's just like, I'm so ready. Like, bring it. But interesting to know because that's just something that maybe these guys wouldn't have been prepared for to that. But I think it all falls down to the agent you pick as well and how they prep you for these kinds of things, right? So and you would probably know a little more on that. But I mean, it's kind of a super exciting, fun process. You fortunately are aware of the process. Me, I thought, okay, everything's wrapping up, bowl games and stuff are over. I'm gonna chill. No, no. Not right now. And then I was like, okay, because I have high school daughters, right, that want to do things and stuff. And I have like blackout dates on my calendar where no travel, no this. Okay, can travel but need Wi-Fi. So I thought it's relaxing. And now it's like, okay, so we're through this. Oh no, spring ball started. Shoot.
Yeah,
there's there's like no rest in the coaching world when you work with these boys. Maybe May. We could take a vacation. I don't know.
yeah.
But I appreciate you being here. Is there any last piece of anything you want to say that comes to mind for the guys? Or I mean, you gave a lot of nuggets, which is great, and I appreciate it so much.
No, I just think I think what you're doing is awesome because I think in our world that's probably been, we as coaches have been de facto what you're doing, but we're
Mhm.
only really coming at in our world until you're old enough, in my opinion, and experienced enough to be honest and to have gone through all of the experiences these guys are going through.
Yeah.
It's very hard to give proper answers, right? Because when I was a 25-year-old coach, everything was like, well, this is what worked for me, dude. This is what I did. And yes, that's helpful to an extent, but that might not also be what works, right?
Mhm.
What works is when you have gone through enough experiences to say, I have tried and tested, this is what I've seen over thousands of players,
Yeah.
right? That I can truly tell you how I feel is the right answer. So no, I just wanted to say I appreciate what you're doing. And I know a lot of the guys that I work with that work with you really enjoy that because I do think that there inevitably was the piece that was missing, which was how do you deal with the like, not necessarily off field, but that aspect of when you're by yourself on a practice field or after a game or in the off season and you're not doing well or you are doing well, how do you get out of it or maintain it?
Right.
Right. And I think that what you're doing is awesome. And I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me as well, because it's so fun to talk about, our athletes and ways to help them as well.
Yeah. I appreciate that. But it's fun.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Always learning.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for watching and listening to the Talent Alone Won't Win podcast. If you want to get more tips and tricks on how to uplevel your mental game, subscribe to the channel and visit my website, SuziFreeman.com, and let's connect.